Hello everyone, good evening. Can we all hear me? Hello, good evening. Can we hear me? Please, can we have someone confirm that they can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to class. Okay, welcome to class. Officially, we are week 6 of the JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship program. Okay, please, you can kindly mute your speakers, everyone. Thank you. We are currently in week 6 of the JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship program, and from our flyers, we can see that this class is a combined class. So the what we have planned for today is to host a session that is inclusive of every course, right? Every course. So we designed these particular sessions for week 6 to just capture, a variety of course that we believed that was going to be important, and we could get on board everyone into particular topics and discussions that covers a lot of areas and a lot of field that affects us. And one of that field is human rights and business, as what we'll be discussing today. And we'll be starting right about now. Our mentor for today is not yet here with us, but I will try to just kindly introduce him. Okay, our mentor for today is Mr. Joseph Obo. Mr. Joseph Obo happens to also be the co-founder of JIIPCC Academy. So Mr. Joseph Obo spent 12 years with the National Human Rights Commission and rose to the rank of Chief Legal Officer with core duties relating human rights mainstreaming into legislation, review of government policies with human rights in mind, as well as providing pro bono human rights services to the less privileged. Joseph Obo is currently leading the expansion projects for foreign partnership for Nigerian company, an online company registration platform, which presently has delivered over 2,000 incorporations for clients both in Nigeria and abroad. He acted as the group board secretary for Besteda Africa Development PLC, an investment and financial service company in Nigeria. He is a mentor, co-founder of the JIIPCC Academy, as well as the president of the South Korean International Cooperation Association of Nigeria. Joseph has an LLM in Information Technology and Communications Law from Strathclyde University, Glasgow, Scotland, and has attended several courses across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Okay. I don't know if we have Mr. Joseph on call, but we would like to welcome him. Thank you so much, sir, for joining. I can see you are already with us. We are happy to have you in session. Welcome, Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. Just, you can let me know when you want me up. That'll be totally fine.
Yes, all right, sir. So we are about to start our discussion already. We've introduced the topic for today, that's human rights and business. We've also introduced you. So we'd like to just give you the floor for your discourse on the subject matter for today, sir.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's a very great pleasure to be here today. I had to just quickly rush out of another meeting about 3 seconds ago. Let me just say about 30 seconds ago to get online right away. Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Dennis. I would need some help with the slides. I don't know if you were able to, if you have access to them. Do you have access to the slides?
Yes, I do. Sorry, my network is a bit shaky this evening.
Okay, is Sophie on the call? I don't know if Sophie is on the call. If she could
Yes,
be kind enough.
I am.
Yeah. Is this something you can help me to project?
Okay, let me try.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully, I'm sure that this session will be quite interesting. You know, most of us, when we hear about human rights, basically what a lot of people think when they hear human rights, they're thinking around maybe issues around police brutality. You might also be thinking about maybe the rights of a child, the rights of aged people, the rights of persons who are physically challenged. Business and human rights basically has to do with the obligations that companies have when you look at those obligations from the lens of human rights. And currently in Nigeria, we have what we call, please, can we have this, the other presentation? This one here is like the case study. This particular, there are 2 slides. The first one is the main presentation. This is the case study. I just wanted us to have some practical applications to some of the principles that we'll be sharing today. I'm also trying to see how I can, if I can get that up, but I don't know. I'm still having some brief challenges. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Let me try and get up the main slides. So sorry about that, sir.
No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. Thank you for all the support, Dennis. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so I was talking about business and human rights. I wanted to just create like a foundation. We have what we call the United Nations Guiding Principles. That's the UNGP. It's something you can look up online. You can also download that document. And when you go through, you would find out that there are 3 major pillars in the UNGP. You have the state duty to protect. Then you also have access to remedy. Access to remedy just basically deals with the fact that either the state or even companies must have like mechanisms in place to ensure that individuals whose rights, or a group of individuals whose rights have been violated, can access remedy. Like we all know, much of the major challenge around human rights or even any rights in Nigeria basically rest on the judiciary. For example, in some countries, you will find out that issues around access to justice, there are already institutions that take charge of this particular area. And if, for example, you have to be in court for certain issues, you might necessarily not be in court for maybe up to 6 months, 3 months, even 2 months. I once heard of a case that even it was a judge's house where he had tenants and he was in court for 3 years just to get justice, just to get his tenants to move out of his property. He spent 3 years to do that. You can imagine the loss that person would have incurred. So when we are talking about remedies, we are looking at the remedies that individuals would have in case their rights have been violated. They would have access to that remedy within a reasonable amount of time. And like we already know, there's this principle, I think it was Lord Denning who said that justice delayed is justice denied. Of business, or looking at business from the lens of human rights, we also need to know that issues around access to justice is something that the state must guarantee. It must be guaranteed by the state. When the institutions are weak, most of them access to justice. Then the other thing also I want to add in relation to the UNGP has to do with the obligation of companies. What can companies do to better ensure that they have more of like a human rights policy that guides their actions? So what this session basically would be about, it would treat human rights policy. Just a second. We're gonna look at the human rights policy and what are the things that we must consider when you are crafting a human rights policy document. Then at the end of the session, we'll briefly take a look at the case study so that we can understand what this is really about. So I'm going to quickly delve into my first slide. I'm aware that I have about, 30 minutes? I'm about 4 minutes gone. So I don't expect that we will cover everything on the slide, but you can just definitely go through the entire slide and see how best, or what you can pick out from the slide and what you can learn what you can implement in your own business for the future. And if you're working in a law firm or you're working in a company or you hope to find yourself in a boardroom, for example, a case study as well. But this happened somewhere in northern Nigeria where women go to a mining site, for example, to look for work. But before the managers of the mining site give them work to do, they molest them sexually, they violate them sexually, and things like that. So as a business and human rights practitioner, the only thing that goes through my mind would be, what can that company do better? What are the human rights laws or rules that the company has already breached? Representatives of that particular company carry out those kinds of activities. Are there ways to bring those companies to account, looking at it from the lens of business and human rights? So that's just what business and human rights is really about. You look at the actions of companies, you also look at the responsibilities of the state, then you now think about the access to remedy. What are the mechanisms that are available for people to be able to access justice? Yeah, so that's the entire fulcrum of what today's session basically will be about. So I'll just quickly go to slide 2. If we can go to slide 2. Yes. So slide 2 deals with commitment to human. And it's looking at it from the perspective of, when you're thinking of having a human rights policy for your company, what are some of the things that you can basically do? So you can look at your commitment to human rights. For example, if you're an oil and gas company, for example, to the downstream sector or issues around maybe drilling for crude, you are in that arm, or you're in that ambit of the sector where your activities can affect the environment of the people that live in that particular area. To really understand this from that environmental rights perspective, you can just Google up cases around Shell, the judgments that some communities have also gotten against Shell from foreign courts. That would definitely help you to understand how that people had to go out of the Nigerian judicial system, and took some of those cases to Europe to go find justice for their people as a result of the environmental degradation that took place in line with the activities of oil companies in the south region of Nigeria. So these things were some of the issues, of course, that led to some level of restiveness in that region. People still trying to assess remedies, but I'm not justifying, this is not a justification. This is not a justification in any way as to why people will become restive and they begin to act counterproductively against the economy of Nigeria. No, that's not the point I'm trying to make. But I'm trying to say that where you have a clear policy statement as a company, if you're an agricultural company, then your policy statement might have to do with issues have to take. You now have to prepare a human rights policy document. It has to clearly state your commitment to respecting human rights within your business operations. For example, there are certain businesses where maybe staff are not well paid, people are not getting value for the time they put in at work. The pay is really crazy. Even when you look at the pay generally, what we call the living wage, is it really a living wage? Those are also human rights issues that can also be raised. So your clear policy statement must state your own commitment, your company's commitment to respecting human rights within the business operations. Sometimes you eat, let's say you have solar panels, for example, in your house. For example, you have a lithium battery. Where the lithium is coming from, what BHR is trying to say is, the persons that mine for lithium, what is their response to the human rights yearnings or compliance in their business as it affects the people within those community? Do we have children in the mine sites? Do we have women? Do we have persons who are not properly paid in the mine site? Is there like an uneven balance? So when you're carrying out a human rights due diligence, for example, you will now begin to draw out all the human rights concerns as a result of the business that a company is basically doing. So in line with commitment to human rights, the second point we have here has to do with international alignment. The world is already a global village. Everybody, you cannot necessarily divest the world from the world. Like trade is international. Despite the Trump tariffs, people are already studying the Trump tariffs to see if there are certain human rights implications. And of course there are, because a lot of people's livelihoods will be affected. If at all those tariffs go into full force, you might find out that people who used to maybe export certain items to the US may necessarily not be able to keep up with that. And there would definitely be fallbacks as to human rights in line with the Trump tariffs. But that's not what today's session is really about. So we're talking about international alignment, and one major policy document, which definitely falls under soft law, has to do with the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, just for short, the UNGPs. So you find out that several countries, even in the global south, in Africa, in India, across Asia, a lot of countries are coming up with what we call the National Action Policy on Business and Human Rights. Nigeria has a draft policy. That policy is still in a draft form. And I'm very, very sure that very soon we would have like that comprehensive document out there for the public to be able to consume. So basically what the NAP does basically is to see how the NAP can look at the country-specific situations. And when the NAP looks into that, it's also to see how the National Action Plan of countries that want to play within this whole business and human rights space, we want to see that their national action plans align with the United Nations Guiding Principle on Business and Human Rights. So there has to be that international alignment. We don't want to have one rule that is working very well in Europe and we have another rule working counterproductively in Africa. Then you now have another one working counterproductively in Asia. So there is a core principle. It's just like the ground norm. The ground norm of BHR is the UN guiding principles. It's like that document that countries have come together to say, for us to ensure that we have accountability by the government, by companies, and remedies for persons whose rights will be violated, we need to come under this set of rules. They are not rules that maybe you can enforce in court per se. It's just soft law. And by soft law, what I just basically mean is that countries are encouraged to adopt principles that flow from the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. So that's basically what this is really about. So also, in having to craft your business and human rights policy for your company, you must also make sure that that policy, you have input from your stakeholders. Imagine having to come up with a policy. You have diverse stakeholders, the community is there, the regulators are there, especially if you are in a regulated industry. Then you come up with a policy that does not reflect the input of who your stakeholders are. At the end of the day, you would create a lot of problems. When you're trying to solve one problem, you end up creating another one. So on point number 3, under commitment to human rights, as part of the things that you should look forward to entrenching when you are creating a human rights policy document for your company is the fact that you must make that policy readily available. Before it's even readily available, stakeholders must have their input. You must make sure that there's stakeholder input. So from here on, we're going to move very quickly to the next slide. And that has to do with governance and leadership. When I talk about governance and leadership here, I'm talking about the governance structure of companies. Like we all know, for publicly quoted companies, of course, the corporate governance rules has in its place that companies that are publicly quoted, definitely need to have like a board oversight. So within that boardroom system where those decisions are being made, how can we take the gospel of business and human rights to the leadership of companies, to the boardroom? I used to support boardrooms. Even now, we work with companies, that private companies especially, that have like a boardroom structure. And much of the time, the conversations that go on in those rooms may have to do with, okay, what are the numbers? The company made a certain loss maybe the previous month. How can we remedy that? You now pick up reports. Maybe your CFO, Chief Financial Officer, is going to present a report. After the CFO is done, then you now have maybe your group chief executive. You also make his report. After that, the auditor will now come up with his own report. Like, you have a whole lot of reports. Then if you have a responsible company that engages in corporate social responsibility activities, that now gives that company the opportunity to be able to at least bring to the notice of the board the activities that the company has carried out in line with CSR obligations that the company has to the community where they carry out their business. So the point here basically is that the knowledge and the spirit behind business and human rights needs to find its place into the governance structure, the governance and leadership structure of companies. Companies are not all about the money. In fact, you'll find out now that where you have institutional investors, a lot of investors, especially from Europe, European investors, and even beyond Europe, of course, even to America, for example, questions around the human rights, they are beginning to crop up more often than not. They are beginning to crop up. We now have organizations that are asking questions, asking human rights and human rights related questions from boardrooms. They need to know what mediums have these companies put in place to make sure that their companies comply with very basic human rights norms and standards. But if nobody takes that message to the boardrooms, then a lot of board members may necessarily not want to keep their eyesight on issues around human rights, not because they don't love it, but because they necessarily don't know about it. So there's still a whole lot more work that needs to be done to see how we can bring about this information, this fresh breath of information to companies, and to see how companies can begin to take strategic decisions on the grounds of the human rights implications that could arise where the wrong decisions are taken. So here now, for example, I would want to suggest that for companies that want to go far, that are doing business long-term, that are doing international business, whose businesses cross international borders or boundaries, like Europe, for example. Let's say you're an export company, you are doing business. Let's say you're in the business of charcoal, for example. You need to cut down trees to make charcoal and all of those things. You might have a challenge in having to move that coal across the Nigerian border into Europe, because you're going to be asked a lot of questions around sustainability, environmental questions around the environment. How do you come about this charcoal? What are you doing to replenish the earth? What are the activities that the company has to engage in? That's the charcoal company now that wants to move its product across the African continent into Europe. Europe already has, in fact, if you are looking for the most regulated continent, I would vote for Europe any day, anytime. Europe has regulations upon regulations for anything that your mind can conceive. There are regulations, there are rules, there are procedures, and that's a continent that is working. So basically, when Europe now expects you to apply certain rules and certain procedures, and you don't have that knowledge, it will be the reason why maybe for an export company, you might have your goods maybe sent back or even seized by that country because you are out of compliance. So that's why the leadership at the helm, the leadership of boardrooms in companies must make sure that they have a representative, a human rights and business representative, somebody who understands this field, who will be able to guide the company. And also in terms of having to come up with business strategies, we want to see more of companies incorporating human rights considerations into the way decisions are made, and of course, the way business strategies are formulated in those companies. We cannot continue to do business as usual because the world is moving on and the world is moving forward. So you don't want to have a business wherein there are a lot of human rights infractions, and at the end of the day, the reputational crisis that some of your European partners can come into as a result of your own inaction here in Nigeria. So that's why the law in Europe, requires companies to carry out what they call a human rights due diligence. So that due diligence is to make sure that the entire supply chain of that particular company complies with certain rules and procedures that have human rights implications if those companies do not comply. And of course, the reporting system in Europe, for example, on human rights related issues as it relates to businesses is very high. When you look at companies like even the Mercedes, for example, in Germany, you look like the Audis, you look at the Volkswagen and all of that. There are rules. You don't just see those flashy cars. You see those beautiful vehicles that the rich can afford in Nigeria, and you think that those companies are not complying with certain rules or certain procedures. They actually comply. They actually comply. So it's very key. It's very important, and these issues have now become front burner issues. I will just quickly touch on the third point that I have here. For lawyers here or law students here, one of the things that lawyers do the most, I'm already on the third slide that has to do with due diligence and risk assessment. I hope I'm not too fast.
Your speed is fine, sir.
Your speed is fine, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, thank you very much. So due diligence on its own, from the business perspective, is a massive business. If you're a professional, you can even say, okay, I want to stay with due diligence and risk assessment as a professional, as a lawyer, somebody who wants to play in that field. It's a very massive field. There's a lot of money there to be made. But my intention here is how that you can include compulsory aspects of due diligence and risk assessment in your human rights policy. It's one of the things that must be in your policy document. You must, the company that you work for or the company that you know about, if, for example, now you're looking at a company like Dangote, for example, when I look at the Dangote refinery, I know that so much work must have been done. A lot of due diligence must have been done, even human rights due diligence, environmental due diligence. Just think about any kind of due diligence that a refinery would need to comply with. That Dangote refinery must have complied with that. So for businesses that really want to play on the international scene, for businesses that feel that they have a vision beyond just mere talk, where you can hide within the regulatory system in your country. You are necessarily not doing things that have a cross-border application. You can still hide, but even within our country, for example, I think sometime last year or 2 years ago, there was this story that made the rounds. It had to do with, I think, it was a former governor's son who was on a wheelchair, and he went into an eatery at the Muritala Mohammed Airport in Lagos. And because he was on a wheelchair, or so to speak, it appeared that his wheelchair was taking up a lot of space within the eating area. And the staff of that eatery asked him to excuse himself out of the eatery. Let that sink in for a moment. If you want to even look at all the violations, like in that action alone. But some persons have said, okay, the staff may not have been properly trained to understand the implication of that action. But if you even want to look at it from the aspect of your own humanity, that was wrong on all grounds. And I can say that again and again. That was wrong on all grounds. So when we are thinking of human rights due diligence, one component of it, which necessarily is not here, although we have here stakeholder engagement, that stakeholder, of course, it includes engaging with employees, your employees. they need to know their responsibilities in line with the activities that they carry out in companies. It's not enough to have a policy document, and at the end of the day, even the people that the policy is meant to address have no input into that document. So you can almost tell that the actions of that eatery in trying to excuse somebody who was physically challenged, to excuse that person from a business facility, already can tell you that there was no proper human rights due diligence within that particular company. The staff didn't necessarily know what to do. All they were thinking about was that, okay, if this person stays here with a wheelchair, he might be occupying the space meant for 2 to 3 persons that need to access maybe food or something or whatsoever. So on the basis of that, they were making a business decision, but they were faltering on the human rights aspects of that particular decision. So that just tells you that it's possible to make money, and at the same time be in violation of human rights. It's possible to call up beautiful numbers for shareholders of companies, but at the end of the day, people's rights are being violated. In fact, one of the things, there's another case study that I carried out. This case study had to do with a university somewhere in the south region of Nigeria. And that university was able to acquire land, massive amounts of land. If you travel to maybe the UK, for example, you would even see that universities are just along the road. People walk past universities. Like the university I went to in Scotland is just along the road. You walk into the law faculty. From there, you see maybe like is in Sainsbury on the road. Like everything is just mixed up with society. So you don't have maybe like a University of Abuja now, or Ambassador University, Ekpoma, where I graduated from, having massive amounts of land and all of that. So this university they didn't even acquire the land. They were gifted the land by the leadership, by section, or by the leadership of the community. And at the end of the day, the persons who had the ancestral rights to the land that was given to the university, they began to cry out. They couldn't farm anymore. They could not benefit from the land that their ancestors had access to, and the lands that were theirs, because they didn't personally hand over that land to the university. So what does that tell you? It tells you that, one, the university did not carry out a proper due diligence. Even if somebody is giving you a gift, it's still your responsibility to make sure that you are collecting that gift in a way that the person who has given it to you has the right to give it out. So that land, the issue around the land that they acquired, there were a lot of issues around it, no proper risk assessment. And at the end of the day, you can see that this area that has to do with stakeholder engagement, you can almost tell that this company, or better yet, this university did not carry out proper stakeholder engagement. And that was why you could now find out that the community in itself were almost rejecting the university. It felt that way. It felt that way, and that's not the right way for companies to proceed. You have to carry along all your stakeholders. Is very important, because at the end of the day, when the news goes bust, people now it begins to affect the image of that university. In fact, this university I'm talking about is still a university that is in session at the moment, and they had to change their name. You can imagine a university changing its name. Just imagine a private university having to change its name because of just simple things that they would have done to carry everybody along, and to, of course, to make sure that the rights of the community where they cited that university, was not violated in any way. So that's why it's important that when you have a human rights policy, you must truly make sure that you make sure that you have you have the due diligence aspect, within that policy, so that you protect yourself from litigation, you protect yourself from a lot of backlashes, you protect the reputation of your institution, because I, for one, I cannot imagine having to go to a university. What is your moral ground to believe that you can impact the students that you hope to impact when you are already in violation of the rights of the community where that institution is cited? You want free land, but you are not necessarily able to do the right things that you need to do to make sure that everybody is carried along. So that's one of the things that I feel we can look at. So far up on the slides, we have issues around labor rights, workplace practices. There are some jobs that people used to believe were not meant for women. These days, all those thought processes, they have been rewritten, and you now find more women in the boardrooms of companies. It's almost a race against the numbers, but I can tell you that things are actually getting better with response to that. Then, of course, supply chain and business relationships, is one thing that also has to be considered. What does the supply chain just basically mean? It means, for example, let's say we're looking at a car manufacturing company, maybe in Germany, for example, or even in China. Let's use Germany for an illustration. The German company would have to make sure that its supply chain, much of the supply chain of these companies, they go down to third world countries, many of those countries in Africa. So the job of the company is just to make sure that along its supply chain, there are no human rights infractions. There are no human rights infractions. They have to ask the necessary questions from their suppliers, from everybody that, ensures that the entire value chain of that car production system, responds to human rights in a way that there are no violations. And even where violations occur, that there are remedies to, cushion the effect of those violations in the first place. I know I'm almost out of time. I would want us to, okay, we have this non-discrimination, diversity. I think these are like things that that are easy to grasp. Then also on my slide here, I have a grievance mechanism. What grievance mechanism just means is if, for example, there is an issue, what is the mechanism for people to be able to report human rights violations, within the businesses, within companies? Does the company have a mechanism for people to report? Then in terms of access to remedy, is there also a system that makes it easy for people to access remedies? And here I just put 3 points here that had to do with transparent mechanisms. Everybody needs to know what the rules are. It's not the rule applicable to Mr. A, then when it's Mr. B's turn, another policy is drawn up, to cut corners and all that. So human rights is basically against that. And of course, we all know that when you're thinking about whistleblower protections, like are there retaliations? Can people really whistleblow, if I will use that word, so yeah, so that's just basically part of the things we're talking about. Then also corrective action. We need to ensure that there are actually remedies in the actual sense. Let's not look at human rights from the angle of somebody's trying to get remedy for a human rights violation. Then the usual go to court. When you say go to court in Nigeria, sometimes it almost can mean that the person is trying to tell you that you might not be able to get justice. So that mindset shift, we need to deviate from that mindset shift, especially when we are talking about human rights. And of course, I personally am believing strongly that, the moment would come when individuals will be able to say, okay, you have a matter in court, and you can almost say in 3 months, this matter is going to be dispensed with, or in 6 months, this matter is going to be dispensed with. And of course, what a lot of companies are basically doing, because of the rugged nature of the judicial system, a lot of companies are looking at, that's responsible companies now, they are looking at alternative dispute resolution mechanisms that they can put in place. I know that we have a course on the JIIPCC mentorship program on ADR and all the other aspects to it. Yeah, so all of everything that for those of us in the ADR class, I can say that you can apply everything that you've learned there as an access to remedy portal for you to be able to assist with issues that have to do with, business infractions of human rights. Basically, that's the point I'm trying to make. I can hear that I might not be visible. I hope I'm not. No, I'm not on mute. So maybe it's my network. I'm not sure. Somebody can't hear me. Somebody can't hear me.
Your network is fine, sir.
Oh, okay.
I think your network is fine.
I thought I had issues with my network. So we're almost getting to the end of this. I want us to just quickly look at. I want us to quickly look at the Hawks Power. There's a company in Abuja here, Hawks Power System Limited. If we can have that slide up, I'll be very quick with that so that we can just proceed with what we have for today in line with the time schedule. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for helping me have that up. Thank you for helping me have that up. Yeah, so right here, Hawks Power Systems is a leading renewable energy provider in rural Africa and Asia. Recognizes its vital role in upholding the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights. Their commitment involves thorough human rights due diligence and the implementation of comprehensive human rights policies. So you can check out the company online. I brought this company up just to show us in practice, how that companies can comply with, business and human rights principles in line with the UNGP and still be profitable. Although basically what this company does is they provide access to electricity. The company also works with the World Bank. They work with a lot of donor agencies and all of that to make sure that rural Africa and many parts in India, persons who are off-grid. Sometimes you might be driving on an express road, for example, in Nigeria, and you'll be shocked that on that same road that you are driving on, persons maybe 20 kilometers to your left or to your right, there might be communities within the forest that do not have access to power. So what this company does basically is to make sure that they're able to provide access to electricity that's based on renewable energy, like solar systems and all of that. They're able to provide power to persons that require access to electricity in these communities that are not connected to the national grid. Because when we are talking of access, access should not just be restricted to persons in big cities in Nigeria. There are a lot of persons in rural areas that are not even motorable. You might need to be on a bike for 6 hours, to get to some of these communities. So what Hawks Power System does is they try to provide power for persons who naturally would not even have access to electricity in the first place. So when we look at this company, for example, from what I've said, and we are looking at it from a due diligence perspective, one of the things that we would need to understand is if peradventure this company has already cited a location, what do you think this company should do? What are your thought processes? What should be the first thing that they should do? Imagine yourself now as a business and human rights professional, a power company, a solar power company that wants to provide power to a community that is off-grid, off development, off infrastructure. What should they necessarily do? So on the next slide, I've put up three things that we can look at. So the first thing basically would be that you don't just run into a company, a community as a company, and maybe because you have resources or you think you have the backing of the powers that be, you now begin to acquire community land for the purpose of doing your business. So as a responsible company, the first thing you would need to do if you worked for this company and you wanted to engage further, you would need to make sure you have community engagement. Is very key. These things, they appear very simple, but sometimes you'll be so shocked that a lot of companies, however good their intentions are, much of the time, things as simple as engaging with the stakeholders, engaging with the locals, trying to know what they need, not you going there to tell them, okay, this is what you need and all of that. You listen to them. They let you know what their thoughts are before you even think of establishing your business within that location. For example, you are a mining company and you just take the caterpillars there, you take the bulldozers there, you take all the dynamites there, you begin to blow up rocks and all of those things. Have you sat down with the community? Have you carried out a human rights due diligence on your activities and how your activities will impact the lives of the people that live in that community? Have you done all of those impact assessments? Are there things that that company or your company has sat down to really look into to make sure that everybody is carried along and you can minimize the infractions that, because much of the time, people talk about, okay, the company must do ABC, the company must do that. Even the community themselves, they also have their own responsibilities, because somebody is bringing development. They are going to be employing workers from your community. People are going to get jobs. People are going to, the economy of that particular region will be reflected by the activities of this community, of this company. So what can the community also do? So all of these issues, somebody said the audio is low. Wow. Amazing. Well, I'll do my best to increase my voice to the...
Sorry, sir. I don't...
Sir, I can hear you from my end. I think it's her phone. She needs to...
Okay. So I'll just go on then. So the point I was making is, as much as companies have responsibilities, the community must come into some sort of understanding with that company so that the company can benefit as much as the community would also be benefiting. So all of these conversations must come about when you are carrying out your due diligence process. Then, of course, we have a second point there, labor practices, rights of employees, the contractors, the working conditions, the wages. Are people paying a living wage? Even though when I talk about living wage, for example, like we have a living wage in Nigeria. Of course, you guys all know that. I don't exactly know the exact amount, but I know that it's something within the range of, is it 70 or 80,000 naira or thereabouts, that the government came up with. And I'm sure that a lot of states, many states might still be having that challenge, having to pay that amount, So there's still a lot of conversation around the fact that can that living wage, can it take you home? Can it take you home for a month? When you buy water, you buy electricity. Let's say you are living in a band A area now, you are buying band A electricity, you are having your transportation costs, you are having your medical costs, if you are not covered by health insurance, a lot of costs. So the funds that you earn, the money that you earn at the end of the month, is it enough for it to cater to your needs as a human being? So labor practices, living wage, all of these issues, there are a lot of human rights issues that you can pull out from there in the first place. Whether they are justiciable or not is another issue entirely. Then one of the major things also that this company would have to take into consideration has to do with the environmental impact. Are there adverse things that could occur, like are there like negative things that could happen as a result of the company carrying out their business within that area? I will share. There's this mining site. It's a quarry mining site in Abuja. And sometime 2 years ago, I went there to just go buy some granite. And when they blast the rock, you can almost feel the vibration. The word is not even almost feel. You can feel the vibration. So imagine living within the vicinity of the operations of that company. Then not to talk of the dust, the noise, heavy duty machinery, moving around the area and all that. So you would also notice that the air within the region, it's very thick. It has a lot of dust in it. So you can already almost begin to tell that the community within that area might witness some health challenges with time. those things may not become very obvious now, but over a period of time, maybe respiratory infections, some other things happening to people's lungs, all of these things might begin to happen. So the question now is, has that community or has that company carried out a proper due diligence to be able to know where the challenges might come from as a result of their operations, and what can they do to avoid those adverse effects, on the local ecosystem? And of course, the local ecosystem also includes the people that live in that locality. So that's one thing that we should also take into consideration. And I think I have one or two more slides before we are done with this. So that we can move to maybe questions. If there are other things I need to respond to, I can also take that and respond to that. So on this slide, on this slide we have integrating due diligence findings into action is crucial. Then Hawks Power System achieves this by developing detailed action plans that assign responsibilities and timelines for addressing identified risk. So for example, you're a company, you don't want to leave a lot of things to chance. If you know that that's why companies, like businesses, normal companies, when they engage, they don't necessarily engage as government would engage much of the time. Companies want to do things quickly. They don't want issues with their supply chain. They don't want issues with compliance. When there are issues, they want to deal with those issues straight up, and everybody just moves on very quickly. So developing detailed action plans that assign responsibilities is very important. Collaborating with local authorities and also NGOs. There are a lot of NGOs that also work in this business and human rights space. Many of them may not necessarily know that the work that they are doing affects business and human rights in Nigeria, but basically the impact of their work, like much of all these environmentalists that we have, then all these environmental activists, much of the work that they do, either through their NGOs or maybe through the communities that they live in, it affects how companies interact with the community based on their own response to human rights within those communities. So we must also ensure that we have tailor-made solutions for communities where these companies actually operate. The next slide, tracking response, communicating impact through transparency and dialogue. I think that's the slide after this. The slide after tracking response is communicating impact. So that communication is very important. Transparency, you have to build trust. As a company, you need to build trust. If you're working with a company and you're here, you need to advise your company to carry the people along. You don't want to work in a community. At the end of the day, the community itself is now sabotaging the efforts of the companies that work there. No, everybody needs to see how you give and you take, you give and you take. If you're a company and you have that mindset of you want to take all, you want to use the community, and you begin to give the community that kind of vibe, at the end of the day, you run the risk of losing out on your entire investment within that community. Your business can relocate, but the community remains. So companies must begin to see that they can communicate transparently. They can have like an open book. They communicate properly with the communities where their company is serving. And at the end of the day, when you maintain open communication, communities would definitely, they would even go beyond the normal threshold just to see that that company that is carrying out its activities in their domain has all the support, that it can get at the end of the day. Yeah, I know that, one of the things I mentioned earlier when we talk about human rights, we're talking about non-discrimination, gender equality. These days, there are a lot of men that are even in this space that are fighting for gender rights, gender equality and all that, which is a very beautiful thing. So it means that, a lot of good work has gone on already, and so much good is still going to be happening. So companies have to project diversity, equal opportunities. Then sorry, where we are heading currently, there's a lot going on out there to see how women can be encouraged to come into the workforce, to do better, to have all the opportunities that men have had over the centuries. So that's a good thing. Gender equality is a very good thing, and it's beautiful for the workforce. So I think I'll be ending my presentation here. The last slide here, Hawks Power Systems ensures accessible and confidential channels for reporting human rights concerns. This can be a challenge because the person that you might be reporting to has to be somebody who has a transparent mindset, not somebody who would go and sabotage, for example. Communities would raise issues. Then you have people who are now acting as middlemen in communities. They tell the community one thing, they tell the companies another thing, and they're able to make a living, with misinformation with this entire system. So what I'm just trying to say is that, like Hawks Power System has done, companies must ensure accessible and confidential channels for reporting human rights concerns. They resolve grievances swiftly, protecting against retaliation. By embedding these processes and policies, they align with the UNGPs, respecting human rights and fostering sustainable development in communities that they serve. So this example, or better yet, this case study of Hawks Power System is an ideal scenario. This is the expectation that we have of companies, as a business and human rights practitioner. These are the expectations. We want to see companies that open themselves up for transparency purposes, companies that go the extra mile to ensure that they are communicating properly with all their stakeholders, the communities, and even where there are issues, they're able to address those concerns without any fear of any backlash or any retaliatory measure. If you research this area enough, you would learn that, especially maybe you are looking at around areas like the DRC, for example. You're also looking, maybe you're looking at some of these countries in South America, in the Americas, for example. Like it's such a big deal for people to really come out to talk against companies, especially when they are speaking around issues that affect their own rights violations by these companies. Many of these activists, they lose their lives. It's not like you find a human rights activist now, maybe driving a Bentley or something. No, these guys, they go into the trenches just to make sure that communities are not wiped out as a result of the activities of companies. So we need to be like evangelists of this message. You don't have to necessarily be a business and human rights practitioner, for example, for you to have this mindset. This mindset is a mindset of equity. It's a mindset of justice. It's a mindset of the belief system that your country can be better. When next maybe you're on a walk or you move, like I think it's Oyo State. Oyo State has a lot of industries. I know that Ogun State also has a lot of industries. Sometimes I had the opportunity to travel to Ibadan by land from Lagos, Abuja, then Lagos, then I traveled to Ibadan, Oyo State, and I could see that on that journey, you see a lot of industries. You might just want to ask questions around when you see those industries. Your mind should begin to travel. Are these companies adopting the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights? Do they interface with the communities well enough, in line with their businesses? When they look at their own supply chain system, are there pockets of that supply chain system that takes advantage of the people that work for these companies or the communities where these companies operate? So those are the questions that your mind should be generating when you look at companies. When you look at a solar company, for example, you begin to ask the right questions around the operations of that particular company. When you look at an oil and gas company, when next you buy petrol at the petrol station, your mind should travel down to the refinery. From the refinery back to the filling station, you should be able to find out all the gaps, all the things that are happening in line with that entire value chain. Are human rights standards being implemented? When you even drink coffee, for example, maybe you take a cappuccino or you take coffee or something, you should be able to ask yourself the question, on the farms where coffee is grown, or on the farms when you are drinking Milo, you ask yourself, on the farms where this cocoa is coming from, are these companies acting responsibly to ensure that the rights of the farmers, the rights of the communities where this cocoa is grown are protected? So it's a mindset thing. Beyond working in the business and human rights space, I believe that every individual, as far as you're a human being, you're already a human rights advocate in that sense. You necessarily don't need to have a certification for that, for you to be able to think human rights in all the things that you do. And I hope that we'll take this message far and wide. We'll preach this gospel to those who need to hear it. And sometimes, once in a while, you can just search BHR, Business and Human Rights. You'll be shocked what you find out. Even in Nigeria, you would almost see that, you know, when you look at maybe a First Bank, for example, is declaring dividends, you need to ask yourself, what companies is First Bank supporting in terms of financing? What projects are they financing? Are the projects they are financing carrying out proper human rights due diligence? Are communities affected by the funding that is provided by the financial system? You know, so that's the thinking basically around business and human rights. I hope this session has been interesting and, you know, thought-provoking. And I just want to believe that it's been worth your time as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for a wonderful Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for a wonderful discourse from your end on human rights and business. It was a really nice discussion, and a lot of things were pinpointed about compliance, due diligence, companies paying attention to human rights. What the UNDP stance on human rights is like. But we'll be having a question and answer session, right, to clarify any maybe vague terminologies or concepts that the mentees might have not had a grasp on. But before we do that, we'll be taking pictures quickly. So please, for the mentees, we just want to do it so that, before the place gets dark, for those of us that, are within environments that doesn't have proper lighting, we can just quickly take our pictures. So please, if you can, we would like to kindly ask that you turn on your video so that we can quickly take pictures. Thank you very much as you comply. For the mentees, please, can you kindly turn on your videos? Thank you very much, Fina. Thank you, Kainde. Thank you, Akinwale. All right, please, I'll be waiting for us to turn on our videos in mass so that, we will take our pictures very quickly. All right, thank you. I would like to just let's take 1 minute to respond so that we can take that picture. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, just 1 more minute. We'll be taking our pictures. All right. Yeah, we are done. Thank you, everyone. Yes. Okay. So now we'll be heading straight to our question and answer segments. Right. I already have a question I would like to ask Mr. Joseph. Right. But I want us to have an interesting I want us to have an interesting discussion this evening. A lot has been said, and I'm sure like we have questions. We've seen areas where we have seen human rights violation, and you have been wondering, what are some of the remedies within that system. So, you can quickly just put together your questions. We'll be taking, I think, about 5 questions, if that will be possible, right? So please kindly get ready your question. I'll be going first, and then subsequently the mentees. If you want to ask your question, drop it in the chat box or indicate by the raise of hand. So my own question, firstly, would be, Mr. Joseph, you know, one of the highest employers of labor within the country, like in Nigeria, are small and medium-sized enterprise. That is small businesses that employ so much labor, and because of how indirect labor services are around small and medium-scale enterprise, it's difficult. They don't really have things like contracts. Labor staffs is very, very little. How do we ensure that some of these small businesses begin to comply with human rights standards, and what are possible remedies they can take to ensure that they follow regulations, because you find that there's a lot of ignorance. We can track for bigger companies, but how do we do that for now smaller businesses that may not necessarily be compliant with human rights standards?
Yeah, so to quickly address that, the truth is the SME sector, I have to be very frank with you, the SME sector is one of the sectors that is majorly under attack. And I'm not saying this to disparage the government in any way, but why I say what I said is because of the fact that a lot of SMEs are working under very tedious conditions. Tedious conditions from a regulatory perspective. You need to register your company is registered, you need to file your taxes. If you are using a company, you pay your company income tax. Maybe you are working in a local government area. The local government, they come with this tax, that tax. So at the end of the day, for businesses to thrive, because I have to look at this from the both sides of it. For businesses to thrive, they have to take a lot of hits. Having done all the compliance, you realize that many businesses would even have to fold up because what they make at the end of the day is necessarily not enough for them to keep up to speed, to be able to pay a fair wage to persons. And also, like you said, ignorance in the system, there's a whole lot of ignorance. Many companies or many businesses are still operating within the informal business operations. Many of them may not even have an accounting system. They may not even be registered or captured under, government's radar and all of that. So all that too, gives some of these businesses the avenue to be able to do and undo. I, for one, I know that we have the National Human Rights Commission. We also have, for those of us in Abuja, we have what they call the Brekete family. Brekete, I think the Brekete radio or so, where we have Ordinary Ahmed. If you listen to that program on radio, you would know that a lot of some of these day-to-day human rights infractions, they are brought to that station and they look at it. But the little I would say for me personally is that this is a going concern. Like we are moving from one point to another. We even have NECA. NECA is more like the Employers Consultative Forum. What NECA does basically is they have a lot of companies that are registered with them, and they see how they can support these companies to be able to ensure that these companies are adopting human rights principles, they are adopting international practice and all of that. So it's a long journey. To tell you that we would arrive at a point maybe in 2 years or in 20 years is trying to talk about the unimaginable. What I would just basically say is that we who are learned, we who have the understanding, must be the ones in through the support of government. Government still has a lot to do, when it comes to business. The policies to capture these businesses with the right information, with the right idea. We need to see how we can have that. And in terms of payment, the disparity in people's pay and all of that, I'm a business person, right? I'm also a human rights practitioner. What I would just say is that when knowledge is absent, a whole lot can go wrong. So I will still come from the angle of not over-regulation, but to see how that proper information, government can even come up with maybe like a job bank, for example. Like there are a lot of things like in the UK, for example, you have like the job center. You go to the job center as somebody who needs a job. The companies go there, the employees also go there. So they use the job center like an information bank for persons who require certain information. If you even need to know your rights as an employee, you have access to information about what your rights are. So if we have that kind of a system, even Smidan, for example, can power that kind of initiative. We can have that across the country, and people are aware, employees are aware that the employers are aware that the employees have access to government information about their rights. So I believe that if the employers know this, definitely they would want to do better. Then we can begin to have that conversation from time to time. And another thing also I would say is that I would want to call on pro bono lawyers that have the capacity to carry out, certain cases to court for free on behalf of citizens, because much of the time you would hardly find case law. Much of all these cases about maybe a small employee somewhere whose rights was violated, you may not find cases as such, within our case law system in the country. So we still have a very long way to go, and the best we can do is to also begin to support that system. Let's not just negotiate things behind closed doors. Let's see how some cases can get to court. But of course, the average person you talk to, much of the time, might tell you that having to sit through the entire court process is like sitting through the unknown. So much of the time, people don't want to necessarily waste their time, or they feel like maybe going to court for certain trivial matters in court might just end up elongated. It's just like somebody is owing you 100,000 naira, for example. Then you now spend 500,000 naira to go to court. Just think about that for a minute. So that in itself is a challenge. So that's why much of these kinds of cases never really find themselves, you don't find these cases in court, because the money you are trying to get, you may now end up spending 10 times that to see a particular case through. And it's the same reason why I also mentioned that we need to see how more pro bono lawyers that do some of these cases in court for free, how more lawyers can begin to look in this direction, so that we can even have judgments that can tell us, okay, this is the court's position on this issue, this is the court's position on this issue. That can also form part of our jurisprudence and can also enrich the case law system within this area. So that's basically what I would say. I cannot tell you that this is an all cut out solution to this problem, because I don't see one solution to the problem. I just see governments playing its role, the legal sector also playing its role, then persons who feel like their rights have been violated, your ability to also speak up to agencies that matter. Sometimes you might think that, you might not get help or you might not get support from the government. Just you writing a letter to the National Human Rights Commission, for example, or you writing a letter to the FCCPC, the Federal Competition Agency, you can write to them. You can also write to Smidan. You'll be very surprised. But much of the time, because people have this mindset of, is it not government? Nothing is going to come out of it, but you've not tested the system. So I encourage a whole lot of us to see, let's even test the system. Let's see if the system really works. If it's not working, it doesn't mean that we should stop testing the system. We continue to test the system, then we continue to draw attention. We continue to draw attention. With that, over time, you just realize that the change that we are looking for, we might definitely begin to find that change if we are consistent and we are persistent on the system to get the results that we basically. But of course, everybody needs to join hands together. It's not something that one person can actually do alone. You know, it's not just one thing that one person can do alone. There are a lot of these cases across the country, and everybody needs to come together to see how we can find solutions. So like I said, I'm not going to tell you that there's a clear-cut solution. You might have policy that you cannot implement. Do you understand? Like beautiful legislations, you know, beautiful statements from the National Assembly or either of the federal government or the state government, as the case may be. But when you get down to implementation, when you now get down to issues that now have to do with access to that remedy, access to that remedy, the remedy that you're looking for, you now realize that it's a different ball game altogether. So there's a lot of challenge with this basically, and you know, everybody just has to do the bit that they can and see how we can hold the government to account. You know, yeah, that's a tall order, holding the government to account, but we need to start somewhere. We need to start somewhere.
All right,
All right,
sir.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right, thank you. Okay, please,
Good evening.
who is speaking?
Yeah, Fina. Good evening, sir.
All right, please go ahead.
So my question is on when you spoke about companies having policy, not just policy written, but having the human rights this thing introduced, human rights policy of the United Nations introduced into it. What are we going to say about these companies such as Mobile in my state, Akwa Ibom, where they infringe upon the rights of the citizens, sometimes oil spillage, and I think this is something that also happens in Delta State and some parts of the Bayelsa and also Port Harcourt. And also the gas flaring as well, which ordinarily, whenever the rain falls, a lot of people usually rely on the rainfall for water. And when we put our bucket out there, we notice that the soot, that, you know, the gas flaring and all that, affects the zinc. Most times it even destroys the zinc. A zinc that normally would have lasted for as long as maybe 5 to 6 years would start depreciating within 2 to 3 years due to the gas flaring and the soothing. Now, in this case, how can a community, yes, I know that a community can come about a class action, but how can a community come about a class action to addressing this to the Human Rights Commission in order for solutions like this to be preferred to issues like this? Because this has been happening over time, and if we're going to be talking about this gas oil consumption and all that, these are the actions of the government. They know what the community are facing, but yet they are not even giving the community a compensation that would even allow the community to, you know, maybe treat their health, like good access to medical health care and all that. A lot of people die as a result of these water issues because it even affects the drinking water of the citizen. In this case, how can we address this as a class action to the human rights, to the United Nations for a solution to be preferred? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so what I'll start with firstly, basically, is that what the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights seeks to achieve is to put the responsibility, like it's a three-pronged approach, is to put that responsibility, one, on the state to protect and to guarantee the human rights of its citizens. So if peradventure there are issues around, and of course I'm aware of these issues. I'm also from the South region. I once worked with a representative from Eket Federal Constituency.
Yes,
some years
that's
ago.
where I'm from. Yes,
yeah.
It affects us.
So I know that. I don't know, is Mobile still operating from?
No, we now have Mobile actually sold their platform after the last clash they had with the villagers to Seplat and Shell. So they no longer operate in Eket again.
Yeah, because I know that Mobile must have left the Eket area, federal constituency. Yeah, that's many years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So the point is this: your government owes you. That's the reality, you know. But much of the time, the There are a lot of government agencies that even deal with issues around oil spillage, for example. There are a lot of these government agencies, but the interactions that communities have, communities might be looking at other avenues of resolving their issues. I'm not saying that government might be able to solve all the problems. No, that's not the point I'm trying to make. But I know that within the oil and gas sector, there are a lot of reforms that have come about, even reforms around having to cut down the gas flaring over a period of time. All those are things that are already in the works and all of that. So in terms of class actions, you know, there are a lot of case law that go to foreign courts, because most of these companies before now, like the Mobile that we talked about, even the Shell that we talked about, they had their maybe headquarters in maybe Netherlands or thereabout, and you find that many communities, even especially even in the Delta area, even across River State too, much of those cases used to find their way to The Hague, that's to Netherlands, and you realize that okay, they get judgments at the end of the day. Once they get those judgments, how does that judgment debt now, the funds, the compensation we talk about, how does the compensation trickle down to the community members? And I know that government came about with the like the cleanup, for example, where there is oil spillage, the cleanup related issues. You know, I don't know how far that has gone. If you have data on that, you can also share. You know, is Ogoni land cleaned up as we speak now? You know, your guess might be as good as mine, but I feel that I may need to research into that, because I'm aware that the whole UN engagement to the Nigerian government for the Ogoni cleanup was something that our former vice president, you know, spoke so much about. That's Professor Yemi Oshibajo. Yeah, so I would be interested to know how that has, you know, played out at the end of the day. But the goal of this session, and the thinking and the mindset that I want us to have is we need to test the system. You know, much of the time we don't test the system. A lot of lawyers, or some lawyers, might look at the bottom line. Okay, if I pick up a case like this, how long is it going to take for us to get judgment? How long is it going to take for us to get justice? Even when we even get the judgment and maybe there's a compensation or something, you know, how do we enforce these judgments? How do we really get the monies? You know, and when we get the monies, can the money really compensate? At the end of the day, can the money really compensate for the lives of certain individuals that have passed as a result of the effect of the activities of these companies? The money is not enough. It's not enough. So we must do more beyond having to wait at that funnel point of maybe receiving compensation. What can we do to hold the government accountable? What can we do to hold companies accountable? What else can we do? What else? What further engagements can we have with these companies? If, for example, a company, through maybe their corporate social responsibility activities, maybe they build a school, they build boreholes, they plant flowers, or they plant trees, you know, all of these things. Like, is that really enough? Is that enough for the degradation that is taking place within those regions? So we must begin to rethink a new system. I don't want to delve into compensation-related issues, because I know that those issues, when compensation comes, you just realize that at the end of the day, the people that really would even require that compensation, they necessarily don't get it at the end of the day. Let's just call it spade a spade. It now becomes a fight for all, you know, the survival of the fittest in many of these communities. You know, those that hold the yam and the knife, they still find a way to circumvent the entire system, and it's still, you don't get the result you're looking for at the end of the day. So we cannot absolve communities from some of these back-end results of some of the actions that community leaders take, either good or for bad, against the community. But the point I'm just trying to make is, there are government agencies that are saddled with certain responsibilities. How well have communities engaged with these government agencies? How well? What can we do better at? Which of the individuals do we have? Do we have access points to the board members of these companies? Do we have access points to the management of these companies? what other message can we take to them? Because to tell you that human rights and business, issues is like a walk in the park is not true. Nigeria has been speaking about oil spillage for many years. For many years, the gas flaring issue, it didn't just start today. For many years, there has been a lot of consultations. Consultations are still going on, and it will continue to go on. But can we begin to test the system? Can we begin to test the system? Are there lawyers that are willing to add this to their practice, from those regions? Are there lawyers that are saying, okay, I'm a community-friendly law firm. I'm going to give out maybe like five cases every year, for example. I'll take up 5 cases that have to do with environmental rights of people within this community. So everybody needs to play their role. And like I said, all the negotiations that go on behind closed doors, they don't end up solving the problem at the end of the day. That's why I still insist that we must be rugged enough. We must have a system where communities are rugged enough to see the process through the court system. We must be able to rely on the court system to see the processes through and trust that the judges, the lawyers will do the right things by this community, by the communities in question. We must trust that system, because if we do not have enough case law to be able to push some of these ideas and ideals, at the end of the day, we still keep going back to the same question over and over again. Then you now also ask yourself, the people that are collecting these contracts from some of these companies that are operating in the AKH region, who are these persons? Are they the voices of the community? Are they the voices of the community? Are they the people that are supposed to be fighting for the people that are engaging with the companies? So it's a lot of mixture, really, having to deal with some of these issues. But I personally believe strongly that we have to test the system. Agencies responsible for issues around environmental concerns, how well are we engaging with these agencies? Let's even start from there. And let's also begin to see how the information, in fact, like in those regions, almost everybody knows what the problem is because they face it. They see the suits, they see all of those things. They see the skies, they see their vegetation, they see everything. So we're not telling people of a problem that they are not aware of. Even children are aware of these challenges, but we must test the institutions. We need to test the institutions to see how well institutions can basically respond to some of these issues and how we can find a lasting solution. Like I said before, on some of these issues, there's really no lasting solution, but I feel that the government has an upper hand in ensuring that government comes out with policies that are impressed on the companies to comply. And once these companies comply, things will definitely get better for the people at the end of the day. But let's test the system, let's test the structures that we have and see how we can have a better environment for everyone.
All right, thank you so much, sir. I think I'm going to pick up some case law as a lawyer. Maybe I'll begin from 2 each year and then progress as I go.
It's a be very nice.
I want to help my land.
Tell.
Yeah, because I recall that one of the compensations we got was that as a little child then, I was entitled to school in Mobile Pegasus. Yes. So, and then at the time, our gutter was usually washed every Saturdays. And, every April, like this Easter that is coming, and every December, a compensation of food items is usually distributed to the communities. Our primary schools and secondary schools were rehabilitated. But all of a sudden, I think when I got to about 13, I noticed that those things were no longer there. At this point in time, when I asked my dad said the government has actually siphoned a lot. And so that's where we need to start asking those questions and all that. So I think I want to take a toll on that. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks a lot. We need to keep talking about these issues, and once the engagement continues, like, companies will not have anywhere to hide. They'll be forced to come to the table to really see how they can do justice for the people, for the communities where they serve. Hello, Mr. Dennis. Hello, Mr. Dennis, are you there? I can't hear you, Mr. Dennis. Hello, Mr. Dennis.
I think his network is bad.
Yeah, because the line is his voice is breaking. Is Sophie on the call? Sophie, are you on the call? Yeah. So does anyone have like a direct question you want to ask before maybe the session wraps up?
Yes. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Can we hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, sir.
Mr. Chigozie, since you wanted to ask a question, please, you can go ahead and ask.
Okay. My question is, while you were attending to the last question, you talked about making people see some of these things through the eyes of the court, like making them see that they can find solace in the court. And my question is relating to that, and I want to ask, how do we do this? Because every day the system makes everyone see that there is no hope in the court. There are situations where even senators brag on live TV of how they solicited judgment for their people. I personally, because I'm still a law student, I'm in my final year. To be honest with you, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I go out there and I see nobody having any belief in what I do. I'm afraid that I may go out there and because people do not have belief in what I do, I may not be as successful as I want. So how do we make them that, okay, come and they see these things with their eyes? They watch those things on TV. They read from newspapers. So it's not something you come and begin to talk like it is not known. It is known. So when these people suffer, I am not from the Niger Delta. My state does not produce oil. I'm from Anambra State. And yes, I am not affected by this particular issue. I mean, in relation to oil, I know there are other companies in Anambra that violate human rights in their own way. But the issue of oil is one that I think so far it is the worst because I school in Calabar, and sometimes those who stay in Port Harcourt, they come. There was a time they were talking about suits that the air there was kind of dark because of oil flaring and all that. My friend, his name is Caleb, he came back and was like, he wouldn't even be able to spread his clothes outside because if you should spread your clothes, you come back and you see that everything has turned black because the air is cloudy because of the smoke and soot and all that. So how do we make people feel that there can be confidence in this thing that we are, there is still confidence in this thing we are doing? There are reports of a lot of judgments against the government that have not been, a lot of judgments against the government that the government has not honored. So that is my question, because personally, even as an upcoming lawyer, I'm afraid, seriously afraid. So that is my question. How do we make them see light in this thing we are doing? Because they see them themselves.
Well, this question that you've asked me, I don't want to sing Oma Omi's song that if you ask me now who I go ask, because I cannot say that on this session. But what I can say basically is I believe I don't know if I should share my beliefs, right? I've shared all my beliefs already. I believe in a Nigeria that will work. I believe in a judiciary that will work. I believe in a true judiciary that should work. I believe in a true system that should work. But I don't want you to despair. Don't even go into that despair mode of you don't know how it's going to be like when you come up. When you come out from law school and you do all of that, you are a certified lawyer. You can now pick a struggle. You can pick something that you are willing to fight for. But I cannot advise any lawyer right now to pick a struggle that they are willing to die for. I would rather just say pick a struggle that you are willing to fight for, so that you can fight today, you can fight tomorrow, and you can keep fighting. Don't pick a struggle. I, for one, don't pick a struggle almost immediately you're out from law school. Gather as much experience as you can. Over time, you might find some of these areas something that you really want to, add to your feathers in terms of you providing certain level of support systems for those persons who are suffering the brunt from some of these activities. The institutions are there. I used to work with a boss. I'm not attempting to answer your question because I don't have the answer to your question, and I'm not trying to play with words here. But I used to have a boss that once told me that Nigeria's challenge has to do with the leadership recruitment system, and it looks like big grammar. Even to me, when he was like, the leadership recruitment system of this country, his one man, I won't mention his name, but he talked so much about a belief in the Nigerian. This was about 12 years ago. 12 years after, we are still at this point. And it really pains me so much because we have the NJI, for example, the institution that is charged with training judges to do the right thing, right? We have the NJC. The NJC is also there, still about judges. So if we're having a judicial crisis, so to speak, if we're having a judicial crisis where it appears that people are losing confidence, in the judiciary, especially as it relates to some of these cases that have to do with environmental rights within the Niger Delta region and even beyond. That means that we must begin to see how that the judiciary can begin to cleanse itself. I'm not the Chief Justice of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, but it's my job as a lawyer, as somebody that holds the gates of law in this country, and all of us who are lawyers across the country, to see how we can do right by the system. But how many people are willing to do right by the system? That's another question. So let's not do a lot of philosophical conversations here that may necessarily not have the ability to change things on the ground. But what I've always believed in, you are your own voice. At your level, speak your voice, speak your own truth. If everybody speaks their truth at their own level, we might not have the massive change that we are looking for. But over time, we'll begin to have pockets of change that could affect the way the country begins to do certain things. But I believe that one day, like we've been told many years, one day, things are going to be, but that one day appears to still remain in the future. So let's keep hope alive. Let's keep hope alive, and let's hope that a moment will come where, when people talk about the justice system in Nigeria, it will be tales of applause about how the judges or the entire judicial system, which also includes the lawyers, have embraced an orientation that truly seeks justice, that truly seeks the justice in every situation. And like lawyers will tell you, it's all about your perception. You see this way, you move this way, there are points here, there are points there, there are points everywhere. The judge just has to look for the best points out of all the points, So that's the system that we operate. But we need good men, we need upright men and women, in these judicial offices to really do right by the people. And up until that time, we might still be talking about these issues even for generations to come. So it's not something I can answer, really. It's not something I can answer. But I strongly believe that, like Goodluck Jonathan would once said, back in the era, that, the institutions have to be strengthened. And it was on the basis of that he, when the election result was announced that he lost the election, he said his ambition is not worth the blood of any Nigerian. So if we have those kinds of leaders that truly would allow the institutions to work, then Nigeria will be a better place. That's all I would say on this question for now. I don't have the answers, really. I actually don't. And I'm humble enough to tell you that I don't have the answers to the judicial question that you're asking. I don't have the answers. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, sir, for for still trying and still contributing your own quota and trying to give guidance to the mentee that asked the question. So I think we'll be taking one more question in today's class. Right. So please, if you have a question, just kindly raise your hand.
Sorry.
Okay, Adam, please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Sorry, I joined quite late because I was on transit from my place of work. And when writing this article, I came across something. I came across the National Human Rights Commission. And what the question that came to my head was, what are they doing or what have they done so far in their own way? Because this is a human rights issue when it comes to the oil and gas sector, violation, environmental degradation on their part, and so forth, and so on and so forth. So I just want to ask: are there any? Is there anything that they have done in particular that's commendable with regards to chasing the idea that human rights should be protected when it comes to the environment of these people, the Ogoni, people of Ogoni land, and all of that? And if so, how far has it progressed, or has it just been stagnant, or has it regressed in that sense? So that's just
Okay.
my question.
Okay, it's a very good question. I really must appreciate you for that question. I had the rare privilege of working with the National Human Rights Commission for roughly, officially, almost about 12 years before I resigned my job with the National Human Rights Commission. I think I left there as a chief legal officer. My next promotion would have been assistant director, but I had to leave the National Human Rights Commission to chase other things, that I wanted to chase in life. Basically, one thing I would tell you, the National Human Rights Commission, and I'm not speaking for the National Human Rights Commission, this is just my opinion. It's just an opinion. The National Human Rights Commission has an office in Rivers State, in almost all the states in the Federation, and much of those offices act as like a hub. They act as a hub for information gathering, for data collection, and for enforcement activities and all of that. I know that a lot of prominent cases that come up with the commission, much of those cases are dealt with by the commission's lawyers, including the commission's external solicitors. But in terms of environmental rights, for me personally, my department was a legal and enforcement department, and much of the activities that I actually covered had to do with the National Assembly, legislative liaison activities. So I cannot really say so much about environmental rights in terms of what the Human Rights Commission actively was doing or what solutions they actually brought to the table, over those couple of years that I worked in the National Human Rights Commission. But I know for sure that we had like a monitoring department where once all these complaints come through, the monitoring department now goes to see how they can carry out on-the-ground assessment of some of these issues. Sometimes they bring all the parties together. They try to see how they can mediate on some of these issues. And currently, the Human Rights Commission now has like quasi-judicial powers. What that basically means is that there's a process within the National Human Rights Commission where the judge or where a court-like decision can be reached by the National Human Rights Commission through a process. Once that process, follows through its normal procedure, then the decision arising from that process can now be registered as a high court judgment. That's actually as a result of the current, the upgraded act of National Human Rights Commission. So all of these things, like I said, we need to test the system. The question I'll ask now is, how many issues or how many cases have been brought before the National Human Rights Commission that border on environmental rights? how many of those cases have maybe come to the headquarters of the National Human Rights Commission? Because much of the time, the commission may not necessarily have all the resources to begin to snoop around the creeks or the nooks and crannies of the Niger Delta region. But where there are issues that, come to light, I believe that the commission, especially the office in Rivers, would definitely have more like a first-hand opportunity to assess those particular cases and see how they can bring about justice for persons who feel that their rights have been infringed upon. But like I would also say here, I believe strongly that we need to test the system. Even the Human Rights Commission, much of these environmental issues, let's test that system that gives the Human Rights Commission quasi-judicial powers. Since we are saying, oh, the judiciary, at least when people take an issue to the National Human Rights Commission and they subject those issues to their complaint process, their monitoring process, and all the other processes that the National Human Rights Commission has, once we begin to subject these cases or these complaints, to the processes that the National Human Rights Commission has, over time, we can begin to see that, okay, environmental rights cases have now been treated as those cases that, the Human Rights Commission can apply its quasi-judicial power and register such judgments as a judgment of the High Court. Even though those judgments may now be appealed against, at least we've been able to test that particular system that gives the National Human Rights Commission those powers. Those powers were granted by the National Assembly and, of course, consented to by the presidential assent. So let's test the system. Lawyers within these areas, test the system, engage with the commission as much as you can. Engage with the commission in hope. Most people engage with government agencies out of nothing is going to happen. No. If you use that approach, you might not be able to get the results that you are looking for. And I strongly believe that the commission has every power and every right to invite all the parties involved. They can invite the companies involved. They can invite the community leaders involved. They can invite all the stakeholders involved to see how they can even find alternative. They can engage, alternative dispute resolution mechanisms to resolve some of these issues that communities basically have or that impact on environmental rights, because that's like a big, when you talk of environmental rights, is a very huge area. It's a very, very, very huge area, and I believe strongly that I've not seen much of these cases per se while I worked with National Human Rights Commission come up in a way that everywhere was buzzing around, these particular issues. So let's test the system. The Human Rights Commission has additional powers to be able to do a whole lot more in the interest of the Nigerian people. So it's our job to see how we can make the commission as busy as possible when it has to do with issues surrounding environmental rights. Then let's see. Let's now judge the commission as a result of the output of that particular effort that is directed towards them in doing their job. Then we can now say, okay, government is not doing what they're supposed to do, or government is doing what they're supposed to do. But if we don't test the system, we can never know. So I still believe that testing the system is the gift that we can give to ourselves, rather than keeping quiet and suffering in silence. Let's receive complaints from communities that are suffering as a result of the actions of companies that operate in that region. Let's receive those, let the commission receive those complaints. Then let us test the commission. Then let's also judge the commission based on the outcomes. That would be a better judgment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, sir. And thank you, Adams, for your question. So still, just before we go, I think there was a question on the chat box, and it's someone that is asking, this is from Chinonso Godfrey, and she's asking, what are some of the groups we can join to help advocate for these human rights issues, as well as to test the system?
Okay, what I would add to this, there's a friend of mine, he's based in Lagos anyways, and they run like this, should I call it like an NGO kind of system, where they release reports and they release statements. It's not like a radical arrangement that they have, but they do more of a lot of intellectual work that borders on just, informing the public, talking about the issues. But I believe that in every state that we have a commission office in every state. There are a lot of NGOs too, that provide a lot of support in all of these areas that we've mentioned here today. Just a simple search, depending on where you are based, you might be able to find information around, groups that you might be able to join. Personally, I don't necessarily have any group, but I know that sometime in September this year, we'll be having the first Africa Business Human Rights and Sustainability Conference. It will be holding in Abuja. So I'm hoping that JIIPCC Academy can use that platform to also be a voice to address some of these issues. This is something that we are working on in-house, and we are hoping that in September we'll be able to have that first conference. And hopefully once that happens, we can now begin to see ourselves as stakeholders beyond these conversations through the mentorship program. We can begin to see ourselves as stakeholders in this area. And I'm hoping that for the change that we need to see, everybody that has a passion for this can begin to pick up that identity as much as you can. I'm not saying you should do human rights and business full-time, but in your own little way. When you read like This Day, like there's this newspaper, one financial newspaper, This Day, something like finance or something like that, online. They have a page on social media. They put out a lot of information, every day. If you see the one that strikes a chord on business and human rights, talk about it, share your views about it, create videos about it. Let's begin to populate this space, with information that has the capacity to turn around the livelihoods of people who do not have a voice of their own to fight for themselves. As we begin to put some of these issues or some of these stories on the front burner of conversations in the public space, trust me, people that need to move the needle, they will get the right information that they need to get the needle running. And if at all they don't, let's see how we can test the system. It's as simple as just writing a letter and have it sent to the National Human Rights Commission email. They would respond to you. When you get their response, you know what else to do. So that's how change is done. If we do not engage with the system, we would not be able to know whether the system is as terrible as we perceive it to be. So I feel that would be the last thing that I would say for now, and I'll be handing over to Mr. Dennis.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for such an insightful session. You've helped us run through our questions. You've given us a very wonderful delivery on human rights and business. Thank you very much. We really, really do appreciate all your insights and your knowledge shared. Just generally speaking to the mentees, right? Please, we would like for you to take advantage of every tip or every advice that is being shared with you during the sessions. It's the expectations for this combined class is for us to have a further outreach where we can now begin to push certain discussions that may not necessarily be within the space where you will get to hear those information in conventional circles. So what we are doing, right, in terms of this conversation and having everyone listen in so that you can get on board, right, with these particular issues. So we'll be continuing tomorrow again with our combined class, and this time it will be a different topic we'll be addressing and dealing on. But so far in today's session, we are done with human rights and business. Please kindly do well to share on your different social media platforms what you've learned from today's class. Do well to fill in the attendance, and I also want to use this opportunity to start pushing out the information that JIIPCC, one of the channels by which JIIPCC gets to address or deal with issues is through our legal pro bono service, right? We have a legal clinic, a free legal clinic, where we hold consultations, free 20 minutes consultations for people within the creative industry, right? So starting from next week, we'll be dropping information on how you can contribute and be a part of it. Please, we would like for you to respond, right, as we call upon you to be a part of trying to get this word spread across and get people the kind of consultation service that they may not necessarily have access to. Right, we are doing this completely for free. Right. So once again, thank you so much, Mr. Joseph. Thank you to everyone who stayed till the end of class. We really, really do appreciate your presence. With this, we've come to the end of today's session. Like I said, do not forget to fill in the attendance. Goodbye, everyone, and please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah,
See you guys some other time. Please, let's engage on LinkedIn. Obo Joseph, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to follow you back, and let's engage further. Thank you so much. Yeah, bye.
Okay. Thank you.